profit is because normal profit is one of our costs. So we're paying all our costs, right? Our price is enough, is equal to ATC. We're paying all our costs, including a normal profit to the entrepreneur. So the entrepreneur in this scenario, even though they're breaking even, they actually can't do better by doing their next best option. This is the best they can do. It's equal to the next best option. So even though there's zero economic profit, they're earning a normal profit. So should we stay in this business? Should we produce this product? What do you guys think? Should we produce it? Should we get out?
I mean, it's a someone commented.
I love how you always see that. I don't notice it. Okay. Yes. yes, indeed. Iman, we should. Yeah, we should. We should produce it because we can't do better doing something else. We could quit, right? But we wouldn't improve our situation any. So when we see marginal cost and marginal revenue equal to ATC, the answer is yes, we should. But it's going to get even a little bit trickier. That one doesn't seem too hard to understand. But what about if the price falls more? You can see this is sort of a depressing game, right? Because I just keep making the price lower and lower and lower. It's like the limbo, right? How low can we go? We can go quite low. Okay, so what about this? Oops, sorry. Back to my marker. Okay, what about this? First of all, profit maximizing output level. Sharia, where is my profit maximizing output level?
It would be where MR intersects MC.
Yes, it's still where MR equals MC. We're still the same situation. To the left, we're leaving money on the table. To the right, we're eroding profit if there is any. Okay, so here is our profit maximizing output level. Are we earning a profit? Well, if you count negative economic profit as a profit, which is a term, we're actually taking a loss because our price now, look where it is in relation to our ATC at that output level. That doesn't look good. Our average total cost is higher than the price. Okay, so now I'm drawing a loss box. We just want to compare to ATC. Okay, so you might, this is our profit maximizing output level, our MR equals MC. Are we earning a profit? No, we're taking a loss. Should we produce this product? Shruti saying no, Mateo saying no. I'm going to tell you in the short run, yes. We're going to get into this more next week.
The photographers are ready in the activity center field house to take your pictures. We would like to have all staff take a picture for a current ID, website, and for the yearbook. Thank you.
Okay. In the short run, we're going to want to stay in business. We're not going to go into that today. I promise you next week, I'm going to explain why that is. In the long run, we would leave, right? I'll give you a brief hint. The reason in the short run is because in the short run, we have to pay all of our fixed costs if we go out of business. So we're not going to really save ourselves anything by leaving in the short run because we have to pay fixed costs. So as long as we're able to cover our variable costs, which we are, we're actually better off staying in business. But next week, I will show you that with numbers. For today, I'm just going to tell you, yep, this is a loss, but we're still going to stay in business. So where would we go out of business? If we're going to stay in business all the way to that, when would we quit? How low does the price have to go for me to give up? I just gave you a hint. What does it have to fall below?
Would it be below average variable cost?
It would be below average variable cost, exactly. Yep, not below AFC, although June, I totally understand because that's what I thought for a long time. I was like, what, that would make more sense to me. But you're going to stay in business as long as you can pay your variable costs because you have to pay your fixed costs one way or another. But in the long run, if you can't even pay your variable costs, then you're going to have to get out. So we could see, oops, I meant to move this line before I did that. If it goes to here, this is what's going to be called the shutdown price. And at the shutdown price here, we will be actually indifferent. If the price is this low, it's equal to ABC, our loss will be the same if we stay in business or if we go out of business. So our loss here is pretty major, right? And our instinct is to say, get out, right? But if you have a huge lease that you can't get out of, right, you might not jump ship right away. But if it goes any below that, they will shut down now.
It makes sense because the distance between ATCs, the loss we're making, and in that point is the AFC.
Exactly. Yep. Okay, so we're just doing this today to give you a little bit of an idea what this decision making looks like from the firm's perspective. Next week, we're gonna come back to this and put it in the perfect competition model, and it'll seem a little bit more familiar, and hopefully that will make sense. But for now, I just want you to think about it from a firm's perspective. They've got to make decisions about what's the profit maximizing output level, do we have profit, and should we produce it? Okay, before we move on to the market structures, any questions about this? And I'm gonna see if there's any in the chat. I appreciate, Mateo, that you keep noticing.
Ms. Rush, are all of these scenarios going to be on the notes?
All of these scenarios, I'm recording this right now, so yes.
Okay.
It's gonna have lots of nice chiming in sounds about the pictures, but yeah, it will be there. And we'll go over this again next week too. Okay, then let's move on to market structures. So we're gonna have 4 possible market structures, meaning types of competitive markets that a firm could exist in. So the first one is pure or perfect competition. I'm normally going to refer to it as perfect competition, but you could see it either with either name. That's one type of market that my firm might exist in, where there's tons and tons of other producers. We're going to go through all the characteristics of these in a minute, but pure or perfect competition is going to be characterized by a wide open market. Tons of people are producing the same thing. If I want to be successful, I have to compete with them, basically on price. At the opposite end of the spectrum is going to be monopoly, which you're probably a little bit familiar with because there's a board game with that name, right? And the whole point of monopoly is there's only one producer, right? If I'm in a monopoly market structure, it's just me. And then we have 2 market structures that are in between. We have one called monopolistic competition, which is probably not very familiar to you, and one called oligopoly, which you might have a sense of what that is. What does that mean, that oligopoly? It's like oligarchy. What does it mean? Yeah.
Like several major firms would have large.
Good. Like there's just a few, there's several major firms. It's like Coke and Pepsi. Right. That's what oligopoly is going to be. So we'll go through the characteristics of all of them. This one is the one that's probably the least familiar, this concept. And the funny thing is, monopolistic competition is probably the least familiar. It's probably the one that you shop the most often in. Almost everything we buy is produced in monopolistic competition, but we don't know that name, so we don't think of it. So I have this list of the differences, and then we're going to go to this big table. And this table, with all the answers revealed, will be on Moodle as a PDF with the answers. So don't feel like you have to keep up and write every single thing down. So they're going to differ in number of firms, type of product they sell, how easy it is for new firms to enter. So are there barriers to entry, like a patent would be a barrier to entry. If I have a patent on a product, you can't produce it, right? I can actually keep you out. Something like brand loyalty is also a barrier to entry. People like Coke and they refuse to drink Pepsi, right? And you introduce a new soft drink, they're going to be like, no, I like Coke, right? Or if people, every time they pull off the highway on a road trip, they look for McDonald's, they're not interested in your little no-name burger, right? So brand loyalty is actually a huge barrier to entry. Also,
Someone had a comment.
oh, 2 of them. Thank you. Okay, money is definitely a barrier to entry. Yes, absolutely. And especially for things that have very high fixed costs. So something like starting an airline, right? There's a big barrier to entry because how do you get the money to start an airline, right? Like I gotta buy planes, right? I gotta negotiate with all these airports. I gotta get gates. right? I gotta get flight paths approved. So, right, money is a huge barrier to entry. So those are just a few of the things that can keep people out of markets. Price setting power is a differentiator. In some kinds of market structures, the firms have a lot of power over what they charge for a price, and in others they do not. But we're gonna come back to that because that one is one, it's not so much of a criteria for helping us understand the market structures, it's more of a result of the market structures. Non-price competition is advertising. They do advertising. Some do, some don't. This is also a result. Are they efficient? They differ in terms of the efficiency and long-run profit. So let's look at these on this table. Okay, and now I'm not going to use that anymore. Just want the pointer. Okay, so how many firms are there in perfect competition? A lot would be a good word. How many firms, I put many, you can, my spacing here is really odd. How many firms are there in monopoly? And feel free, those of you at home, I will check the chat. If you want to put your answers in there. How many are there in monopoly?
Many.
In monopoly?
Oh, none. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about monopolistic competition.
Yeah, I'm not going in order. Okay, very bottom of the table. How many are there? Just the one, right?
One.
Okay, I see there's a comment in chat, so let me see that. I suppose I should just keep it open. It would be the easiest thing at this point. Okay, one. Yep, there's one in monopoly. All right, in oligopoly, we already said this, right? There's a few. Monopolistic competition, I think that was Aria, is right. There's also many. So monopolistic competition is a lot like perfect competition. There's really no limit to the number of firms that can be in that market. So what is going to distinguish a monopolistic competition market from a perfect competition market? The answer is going to be in our next column, which is type of product. In perfect competition, everybody sells the same thing. So in perfect competition, the best example I can think of is if you go to a farmer's market and let's say you want to buy green beans or tomatoes. You don't go up to different stalls and like, what kind do you have, right? I mean, maybe to a certain extent you want large tomatoes or you have small ones. That's why basil is my favorite example, because pretty much if you're going to go buy basil or like cilantro, it's generic. It doesn't matter. You're not like, oh, I want the name brand basil, right? Just basil is basil. Everybody's selling exactly the same thing. But in monopolistic competition, everybody's selling slightly different things. So if you imagine going to a farmer's market to buy basil, you're just looking for whoever's selling the cheapest. But when you go to the mall to buy new shoes, you're not just looking for the cheapest shoes, right? You're usually looking for a specific kind of shoes that you like. Or if you're going to buy jeans or you're going to buy a new winter coat, right? They're like, I want that kind, like I want a North Face coat, or I want a Columbia jacket, or I want a blah, 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 right? Whatever it is. So in monopolistic competition, every firm it's very competitive, but every firm is like a little monopoly. They're the only one selling their good. If you want to buy an iPhone, you've got to buy it from Apple, right? Now, it's not a great example because that's actually oligopoly. It's a good example of differentiation. It's not a good example of monopolistic competition. There are other kinds of smartphones, right? But there's only one maker of the iPhone, which is Apple. So almost every kind of restaurant, clothing, shoes, jewelry, movie theaters, places you go for fun, all that kind of stuff, it's all going to be monopolistic. Because all the items are going to be slightly differentiated. Even look around, those of us who are in the room right now, look around. Each of us has a mask on, 5 different people, 5 different masks, right? Because we have our slight preferences, right? Maybe I want one that's bright pink, right? Maybe you want one that's whatever, maybe you want one that's disposable, maybe you want one that fits this particular way, right? We all have our tastes and preferences, and so we pick the kind that we like the best. So that is the key difference here. If we go to, and I'm just going to stay on these two for just a second, ease of entry, same thing. Really easy to start a new mask making company, right? Very, very low barriers to entry. The difference is between that and perfect competition is just that your product is a little bit different. There's actually very few things that are produced in perfect competition. Okay, so let's move on to oligopoly. Oligopoly, I'm not even asking because it can be same or differentiated. It can be either one. So an undifferentiated oligopoly would be steel. There's only a few major companies that produce steel, but steel is steel, the same thing. But cars, airlines, and everybody's favorite cell phone companies are all oligopolies as well. Coke and Pepsi, oligopoly, right? And those are all differentiated oligopolies. So going on a Delta Airlines flight, it's not exactly the same as going on a Southwest Airlines flight or a Sun Country flight.